sister, aunt, and friend. She's had a tremendous, tremendous impact on many, many lives.
Thank you, Ann. I think that they have made you do not only double duty, but triple duty. And thank you so much. Ann and I do go back a long way. I cannot express how thrilled I am to be here with all of you tonight to celebrate the 35th anniversary of the inaugural class at Worcester State University. I was a member of that class, and it truly changed my life. And I'm going to tell you about some of those changes as we move along. But the most important honor for me is to be able to honor Lillian. I can't tell you how much she's meant to me in my life. She is an incredible woman, a phenomenal dean, a great teacher, and a developer of people. What she has done in Central Massachusetts has been almost beyond belief. She has touched the lives of so many people. I was extremely proud to be on the committee that wanted to raise money to name the nursing program for Lillian. And as I made phone calls to people, I was so impressed by what they told me about the meaning Lillian had in their lives and their careers. Her reach has been extraordinary. It's not just the students, it's their families and the organizations that they worked for. She has improved clinical practice in Massachusetts beyond belief. She is an amazing, amazing woman. And I can't begin to tell you what you've meant to all of us. Tonight, I'm going to use a lot of I's because I was asked to talk about my own personal journey in nursing. And so at the risk of sounding like a complete egomaniac, I'm going to talk about the things I learned at Worcester State that have truly impacted my life and my career. I've told many of you this story. It's absolutely true. For many months, I waited on Lillian's doorstep. I did not have a chair that was this comfortable. I actually sat on the floor waiting for news about two things. First, did the Board of Nursing approve the program? And second, was I going to be one of the 20 lucky students that were accepted into the program? And thank God that I was well rewarded for that time I spent on her doorstep because she shared with me that I was one of those 20 students. My classmates were extraordinary. They all had very, very successful nursing careers, and they were coming back to go further. They were quite a handful for the faculty. And Lillian and Mary Kay have shared with me many times how much better successive classes were than our class. But they were motivating, inspiring, and we all together wanted to change the world. If there were any nursing students in the room, we thought at that time we were the young people who were going to displace the Turks. And now I'm one of those Turks waiting to be displaced. But it was a phenomenal, phenomenal opportunity. Global lessons. This is really about learning to think critically. And that's what we learned through the nursing program. So these are the global lessons that I learned. First of all, before I came into the program, I knew nursing concepts, and I learned by doing. See one, do one, teach one. That was my model. After the program, I understood that what I was doing, a lot of it was intuitive, and I really needed to dive a little bit deeper and understand the theory behind the practice. I was a head nurse, but I had no formal management training. I just thought I knew it all. After I went through the program, I understood leadership theory and how to apply that in a variety of environments. And I feel blessed that I learned those lessons. I also taught clinical skills. As I said, I was Miss See One, Do One, Teach One. And I learned that, there really are underlying theories. You need to learn them. You need to know them before you can truly teach well. I had a strong nursing background, but what I learned at Worcester State was how to diagnose problems and how to really understand, besides the biometrical information, what was really going on with the patient. It was a life-changing experience. One of the main things that I got at Worcester State was self-confidence. And Lillian, I cannot tell you how much her guidance and direction meant to me. She was the first person who said to me, "Ellen, you're an excellent writer." Had I ever known that today I would be looking at 75 published articles and 3 award-winning books, and I had never written a thing before I was Lillian's student. Thank you, Lillian. It was a wonderful opportunity, and today I still gather the benefits of being able to write. I also learned other things that were equally important that helped me throughout my career. I learned about SMART goals and setting SMART goals. And what SMART goals stand for is first the specific, the who, what, why, when, where, and which that you need to know in order to move forward. Before I came into the program, I was one of those people who thought you could eat the elephant in one bite. You know, you just moved ahead and did. But I learned that you needed to have a continuum, and you needed to take it by steps, and you needed to know where you were going. The goals need to be measurable. You need to ask yourself, how much, how many, and how will I know that I'm done? You also need to have achievable goals. Once you set a goal, it's up to you. If you think you can't, you won't. If you think you can, you will. So you need to say to yourself as you're setting these goals, am I sure that I can do this? Am I headed on the right track? And you need to make that direction. They need to be realistic. You know, if you set a goal that's way, way over the top, it might not happen. But you also need to keep in mind that Rome wasn't built in a day, and you need to realistically approach what your goals are. And finally, they need to be timely. And you need to establish how quickly you're going to reach that goal and keep moving in the right direction. What did I learn about presentations? Oh my God, I learned so much. I learned how to analyze data. I learned how to graph and chart things so that you could really simplify the complex and teach people what they needed to know. One of the faculty members, when they heard I was giving a speech at a national conference, actually talked to me about storyboarding. And I still use the technique today. I always take my sheet of paper and divide it into columns and think about what is the message I want to give and what are the key points that I want to analyze for people and how do I want the slides to show that. You know, when you hear today about death by PowerPoint, it really is because you do too many slides with too much data. I mean, how many times have we heard people say, well, I know you can't read this slide, but what it really means is X, Y, Z. Well, that's ridiculous. You need to understand that people don't want to listen to 47 different PowerPoints in an hour presentation. So make your speeches short, sweet, and to the point. I was very fortunate. I was a divorced mom with 4 kids. And if it weren't for my opportunity to learn how to be a speaker and to go out on the road and make a lot of money, I don't know how we would have made our budget. So for me, speaking was really a critical skill and an opportunity for me to become well-known and for me to be able to move my way up the career path. As I said earlier, I learned how to do illustrations, and I learned how to think about what is it that I want to tell my audience. But I also have 3 things I want to share with you. The first one is prepare. When you're asked to give a speech, you need to find out who is your audience, what is the message they want to give, what is the theme that the people who are putting the program together want you to come across with. That is critically important. Another thing that's important is you need to test out where you're going to speak. And I have a really funny story. I'm sure she wouldn't think it was funny if she heard it. But I followed Rosebeth Moss Cantor at a program in Boston. Rosebeth is a Harvard professor, famous author, wonderful person. Before I went into the room, I checked out the podium, and I saw that the light was very, very thin. And she preceded me. I was sitting in the front seat waiting for my turn. She had a notepad like this with her notes. There was no light on the podium, and you couldn't see her slides. So she took the piece of paper, and she went like this, and then she went like this, and then she went like this, and then she was like this, and then she was like this. And I thought, oh my God, thank heavens I'm prepared. Because she didn't have such a good time. I had a lot of fun. Because I knew, I checked it out, I went up front, and I had my slides. I could look at my slides, and I knew what I was going to say. Second lesson, prepare. Twice, when I was a judge for the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award, I was invited to testify at Congress. A very traumatizing experience. You sit in the front row surrounded by microphones. The senators are up above you on high, looking down with their microphones. On my left was Joe Duran, called the father of quality improvement in the United States. And to my right was the president and CEO of Motorola. I was terrified. If my speech hadn't been tattooed on my eyelids, I think I would have fainted just from the stress. However, I was able to go on without a problem, give my talk, and then get up and leave. And I thought, preparation is really important. Engage the audience. And I'll tell you about a very disappointing experience I had. I was invited by the American Hospital Association to speak at the national meeting. It was at the Astrodome in Texas. And there were 2,000 people in the audience. And as I was about to go on stage, I was thinking, good thing you know your stuff. I followed Jane Bryant Quinn, famous newspaper reporter, financial expert, fabulous woman. Coming after me was Mark Russell, a political satirist who played the piano and entertained people. When I came to my place, I was speaking about how to manage ambulatory care. And I came to the podium and looked around and I thought, oh my God, they're reading the paper, they're talking to their neighbor, they're getting up and leaving. So I tried to engage the audience, but it didn't quite work the way I wanted. The best thing about it, though, was I gave my mother the brochure, showing me between Mark Russell and Jane Bryant Quinn. And she thought it was the best thing since sliced bread, showed everyone she knew, so I thought maybe it was worth something. Learning physical diagnosis, another incredible skill. I like this slide because my poor kids, I palpated and examined every orifice on their body many times over as I was trying to get the hang of learning what was beneath the skin. Books just don't do it. One day at Sunday dinner at my mom's house, I was sitting across the table from my brother. And my brother, I was staring at him, and he said, "What the heck are you staring at?" And I said, "Your facial symmetry." And he said, "Couldn't you just lie and say it's because I was handsome?" Learning about physical diagnosis to me was just mind-blowing. I had been a head nurse, and I always used to play the game with physicians of trying to outguess what was going on with the patient before they could tip to what it was. And now I had a new skill that allowed me to use biometrical information as well as physical diagnosis. So for me, it really was a very, very important learning. Courage. Lillian so many times would say, be bold, break out of your shell, do things that you think you can't do. There's no limit to where you can go if you're just using courage. But I would say that she also taught me how to analyze risk. I would say uncalculated risk is stupid. You should always know, what if something goes wrong? What is the worst thing that can happen? And take a calculated risk, and you will be benefited by it. And I would say, don't be afraid to fail. Did any of you see the movie Back to the Future? The red, wonderful car in that movie was a DeLorean. And John DeLorean was a young man who grew up in Detroit, Michigan, worked for the automotive industry. He was a golden-haired boy. Nothing he did ever failed. He left the automotive industry to form his own company and to design the DeLorean motor car, which is still being manufactured in the United States. It was a bad time. It was in the 1980s when the automotive industry was in a previous recession, and he lost money hand over fist. And instead of picking himself up by his bootstraps and overcoming failure, he got into a sting and was caught trying to sell cocaine to finance his business. Failing isn't bad. It builds character. I cannot tell you the number of times in my career that I failed. One of my most famous failures was at the University of Michigan, and I was building 4 ambulatory care centers at the same time. And one of my people looked at the financials and said, "Ellen, the budget is off by $1 million." I was terrified. I can remember walking down the hill to my boss's office, crying the entire way, thinking, I'm done, I'm finished, this is it, life is over. And I sat down and said, I made a mistake. It's a really big one. I think I know how to fix it, but it's $1 million error. And I didn't get a raise that year. And he beat the hell out of me, I think, for the next 6 months. But he's still my boss today, and it's 31 years later. My mother told me when I was a kid, if you make a mistake, fess up, admit it, and figure out how you're going to get it fixed. And I think that's probably some of the best advice you could ever get in your life. Because as long as you don't try to blame someone else, which is a real character flaw, and I've seen it many times, and those people do get fired when people figure out what really went on, accept the blame and move on. You know, Jiminy Cricket, I know he's not most people's advisors, but when he says, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and start all over again, fabulous, fabulous advice for all of us. Don't be afraid to fail. Persistence. Calvin Coolidge was the 30th president of the United States, and this was his motto. He used to say, press on. And I think this is such a wonderful piece of advice. And there's a great, great example of that today that's on ESPN. And it's the story of one of my favorite people, the quarterback of the Boston, New England Patriots, good old Tom. Tom was a University of Michigan quarterback when I was at Michigan. And if you listen to his story, he talks about how when he was up for the draft, they said about him, he didn't have foot speed, he didn't have the physique, he didn't have the muscles, couldn't throw downfield, couldn't resist the rush, didn't have foot speed. In other words, he couldn't do anything. He was drafted number 199. And he was devastated because of that. But when Bob Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, said to him one day, he said to Bob Kraft, I'm Tom Brady. And he said, I know who you are. You were our 199th pick. And Tom said back to him, it's the best pick you ever made. This is the epitome of persistence. And to be successful in your career, you need to keep those stories in mind and be persistent. Don't take no for an answer. Come back at the problem in another way and be persistent. So I went to UMass for my first job. I was an adult nurse practitioner in the primary care clinic. It was a job I loved. In the morning, I did medical school sick call, which I just loved because the medical students were so funny. They would say to me, you're just a nurse. How come you can examine me and make a diagnosis when I still haven't seen a patient and I'm in my 2nd year? That would make me laugh. And then they would say, what is this? And I would say, that's a freckle. Are you in dermatology studying nevi? I mean, so it was just a way to make you smile. And then in the afternoon, I saw my own panel of patients, and I absolutely loved the job. I had 2 preceptors, 2 physicians. Vinnie Blaustein, who's now gone on to Boston and is an intensivist in the Boston hospitals, and Dr. John Zawacki, who's still at UMass. They were incredible. They taught me so much. And when I was studying for my certification exams, they helped me. In fact, the day before I took my exam, Dr. Blaustein said, Ellen, you could sit for the internal medicine boards and pass with flying colors. I think you should go home and relax and don't think about it again. But I know many of you in the room are nurses. Do you remember the rumor that used to go around about if you got a fat envelope, you passed, and if you got a skinny envelope, you failed? So I'm waiting for the results of my certification exam in the hallway at my house, and it comes through the letter slot, and I look at it, and it was skinny. I was terrified. I didn't want to open the envelope because I was so afraid I had failed. But I opened the envelope and had passed with flying colors and learned it was just a rumor. It didn't really matter at all. So I was very, very happy in my role at UMass. But then the director of ambulatory care left her position. And the two physicians that I worked with said, Ellen, you should apply for the job. You know what it takes to run a good, strong clinical practice. You can really help us a lot. The nurses that work with you really like you. We think you could make a big difference. So I applied for the job, and thank goodness that I got it, because it was a wonderful opportunity for me to learn more and to move ahead and to enjoy a different set of learning experiences. What about UMass? Well, it was really exciting. Lynn O'Neill is here. Ian, were you in that first group that was hired in 1976? They hired us to open the medical center and we opened the emergency services department, the primary care clinic, and then over a series of years, each of the inpatient units. The thing that was so amazing to me is there was no bureaucracy, there was no HR department. You could have an idea, you could go home at night, and you could implement the idea the next day. There wasn't the stifling bureaucracy that there is in a lot of other places. So it was an absolutely wonderful experience. One of the things that happened early on was Mike Bice, who was our CEO, said to me, we need a facilities director. I want you to hire one. And I said, I've only hired nurses. I wouldn't even know where to start. And he said, you know a lot of people. Call a couple of companies, get a job description, put an ad in the paper, interview people, and hire them. And I think I learned at UMass that you don't have to stay in a narrow line. You can step outside and do things that you never thought of. Mike Bice was also important in my career for another reason. When I was recruited by the University of Michigan, Mike invited Steve and I to dinner at his house. And when we came to the house, there was a University of Michigan flag flying on his porch. He had band music blaring out of the house. The table was decorated in maize and blue. And he said to me, you know, Ellen, I hate to have you leave UMass because you've really been an important person, but if Michigan wants you, you have to go. And that's one of the reasons why I packed up and left friends and left family and went to the University of Michigan. So I have much to be thankful for as it relates to Mike and the things that I learned there. One of the things that I didn't want to lose my clinical skills. I worked so hard to become what I thought was an effective nurse practitioner. And so I had a part-time job. I worked at the college clinic Monday nights from 5 to 10, and I just didn't want to give that up. And I probably, if I stayed in Worcester, would still be working there because it was a phenomenal opportunity. I had a chance to teach residents, work with my own panel of patients, and quite frankly, administration is fun, and you can get to do things, but it's political, and there's no direct feedback like there is when you take care of patients, and you get that wonderful feedback from being an effective clinician. But it was a wonderful job. And another thing that I'd like to mention is, finally, today, people are beginning to think what we've known forever, that wellness and prevention is where healthcare ought to be, not on sickness, and maybe we're going to turn things around. Might take a while, though. The decision to go to Michigan, it was really a difficult one. I learned about decision matrices and how to make decisions and how to analyze what you were thinking and make sure you considered both the pros and cons when I was in the nursing program. So you can see the reasons for going. The reasons against were leaving family and leaving friends, but this point is about which mentors do you listen to? Before I went to Michigan, I called Lillian and she said, go. Mike Bice said, go. I had a director of nursing, and she called me into her office and she said, "I don't think you should go to Michigan, Ellen." So I listened. She said, "You are a very, very big fish in a little pond. If you go to Michigan, you're going to be a very little fish in a very big pond, and you're not going to like it." And I listened for a few minutes, but my sense of adventure and my encouragement from Lillian and from Mike Bice, and just my decision about this was a place I wanted to go, this was a place where I thought I could contribute, overruled that. Be careful who you listen to when you're asking for advice. Mentors are great, but just make sure you're listening with filters and analyzing the pros and cons yourself. It was a fabulous opportunity. I should say that the year after I went, I had a joint appointment to the School of Nursing, and one of Lillian's friends, Dean Rita Dumas, joined the faculty at Michigan. And she was so excited when she found out I was one of Lillian's students, and she immediately wrapped her arms around me and said, "We'll do good things together." And it helped me a lot. And just having Lillian's spirit in Ann Arbor was great. In 1988, I was promoted to Chief Operating Officer at Michigan. And it was a phenomenal opportunity. I had teams of people that were just beyond belief working with me. And we had been the new innovative group of people. We started an emergency helicopter program. We started an HMO. The hospital across town set up an HMO, and we needed to have one. And my boss said, "You have 90 days to create an HMO." And after we did it, and then 100,000 members signed up, and we had no primary care network. So I spent the next year and a half developing a primary care network, hiring primary care providers, building primary care sites. It was absolutely incredible. And I think my days at Massachusetts helped me to see that, you know, if you think you can do it, you can do it. So just set up a plan and get going. And I was rewarded by being promoted to Chief Operating Officer. And shortly after I was promoted, I began to think about how can I make an impact on the University of Michigan. It's such an incredible place. And I heard about two physicians that I knew from Boston, two pediatricians, who were putting together the National Demonstration Project, which was all about learning how the tools and techniques of quality improvement for industry could work in healthcare, and could they make a difference. So we joined the National Demonstration Project, and although I was skeptical the first day, as the president and CEO of Corning Glass Works started talking about they got into quality to avoid their trash glass rate. And I'm thinking, trashed glass rate, patient safety, I don't think this is going to work. But by that first afternoon, I knew it would work, and I put together a group of what I would call early adopters to work with me to implement the quality improvement program at Michigan. It was wildly successful. And the books that I've written have been about what I learned during that period and what a major impact those processes had on healthcare. The reason that quality improvement is so easy for nurses is because it's so much like the nursing process. It is the way we were taught to critically analyze issues and be able to bring solutions to problems. It's the same thing. The Deming or the Schuhart cycle is on the right. Plan, do, check, act. Well, how is that different from assess, make your diagnosis, do the planning, implement, and evaluate? Nurses take to quality improvement like ducks to water. And I was extremely impressed with what I learned and how the nurses at the University of Michigan really helped me be successful and develop a fabulous program. My CEO, who had been my CEO then for 17 years, decided to go to be the CEO of Wellmark Blue Cross Blue Shield of Iowa and South Dakota. And he asked me if I would go with him and do the same kind of things that we had done at Michigan for the company. I thought I knew something because I had set up the HMO at Michigan, but I spent my first 9 months, for those people that know me, they won't believe this, being so quiet because I knew what I didn't know, and I was overwhelmed with the language, what needed to be done, how it was different than direct healthcare provision, but I learned a tremendous amount. And I have actually, this new building that's up here, we did what we call our lean and green effort to build it. We just achieved LEED certification, which stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Development at the platinum level, which is unheard of. And it all revolves around the way we were able to create a sustainable building and create sustainable processes to match that building. So I feel extraordinarily blessed to have had the opportunities that I've had. My final lesson, and this one was very hard learned, was about the importance of teams. We had a lot of team-oriented projects when I came here, and I'm the kind of person who would have rather done it herself. And none of those team projects were very interesting to me, but I learned. And I would say for the past maybe 20 years, I have realized that none of us is as smart as all of us. If you have a diverse team that gives you feedback and keeps you on track, you are luckier than anyone who thinks they can do things on their own. I've had a phenomenal series of accomplishments, and none of them have been of my own doing. It's been because I was smart enough to hire the best and the brightest and to get out of their way. Sometimes maybe I need to give them a little feedback, but I tried to treat each and every one of them the same way that I had been treated in my career. And so I say, just give people space and let them achieve their dreams, and you'll be successful too. In summary, I think it's really important, this is a quote from Walt Disney, to decide what your dreams are. I think that nursing education opens many, many, many doors, but you have to be able to dream about what you want to achieve. And hopefully, one day, you'll wake up in your dream. And I hope that happens to all of you. Thank you very much.